AITA girlfriend refused to split the bill and made me pay on the first date. Then I saw my number in her phone saying free food. I left her alone at the restaurant. So, I met this girl on a dating site, let's call her Emily. I'd been on the site for a while, had a few conversations here and there, but nothing that really stuck. Then, one night, Emily's profile popped up, and she caught my attention immediately. Her photos were the perfect blend of casual and elegant, showing her in different settings, hiking in one, dressed up for a night out in another, and one where she's just lounging at home with a book. It was clear she had a well-rounded life, and her bio was smart, funny, and a little bit mysterious. She mentioned she was into good food, great conversations, and loved trying out new restaurants. It seemed like we had a lot in common, so I decided to send her a message. We hit it off pretty quickly. Our messages were witty and engaging. She had this way of throwing in a playful tease here and there, which kept me on my toes. It felt like we were on the same wavelength, and after about a week of back-and-forth texts, we decided it was time to meet in person. We settled on a date for the following weekend. She suggested a restaurant downtown that I'd heard of but never actually been to, one of those places with a reputation for being a bit on the pricey side, but known for its food and atmosphere. I was excited. This felt like it could be something special. The day of the date, I made sure everything was in order. I dressed up a bit more than usual, nothing too fancy, just a nice shirt, some decent shoes, and I even put on that cologne that I only use for occasions. I wanted to make a good impression. I got to the restaurant about 10 minutes early, partly because I didn't want to keep her waiting and partly because I needed a moment to steady my nerves. First dates are always a bit nerve-wracking, but this one felt especially so because I really wanted it to go well. The restaurant was as nice as I'd heard, dim lighting, soft music playing in the background, and a warm, inviting ambience. I picked a table near the window where we could have a bit of privacy but still enjoy the view of the bustling street outside. I sat down and ordered a drink to calm my nerves while I waited for Emily to arrive. She walked in a few minutes later, and honestly, she looked even better in person. She had this confident stride and an air of sophistication that was both intimidating and incredibly attractive. She was dressed in a way that was stylish but not overdone. She clearly knew how to make an impression without trying too hard. She smiled when she saw me and waved, and I stood up to greet her. We exchanged a quick hug, and I couldn't help but notice she smelled amazing, a subtle scent that was just enough to make me notice but not overpowering. We sat down, and the conversation flowed easily at first. We talked about our week, shared a few funny stories, and I was starting to think this was going to be a really great night. She was as engaging in person as she had been online, quick with her responses and full of little anecdotes that kept things interesting. I was really starting to like her. Then, the waiter came by to take our order. This is where things started to get a little strange. Emily didn't just glance at the menu. She studied it like she was preparing for an exam. I figured she was just taking her time to choose something she'd really enjoy, so I didn't think much of it. But when she started ordering, my eyebrows nearly hit the ceiling. She went all out: appetizers, a main course, sides, and then she asked about the dessert menu. She even picked out a bottle of wine that was way more expensive than anything I'd usually order, especially on a first date. Now, I'm not a cheapskate by any means, but this was way beyond what I'd expected. Still, I didn't want to make a scene or come off as stingy, so I just went along with it. I ordered something a bit more modest for myself, figuring I'd let her enjoy her meal. Maybe she was just really into food, which, considering her profile, wasn't all that surprising, but it did feel a bit excessive. As we waited for the food, I tried to keep the conversation going, but I started to notice a shift in her demeanor. She wasn't as engaged anymore. Her eyes kept drifting away from me, either looking around the room, at her phone, or just staring out the window. I'd ask her something, and she'd give me these short, almost distracted answers, like she wasn't really interested in what I had to say anymore. It was like the connection we'd had online had evaporated the moment we met in person, and now she was just going through the motions. When the food arrived, it became even more apparent that something was off. Emily barely acknowledged me as she dug into her meal with a kind of single-minded focus that was almost unsettling. I tried to make a joke about how good the food looked, but she just nodded and kept eating, barely looking up from her plate. I'd never seen someone so engrossed in their food before, especially on a first date. It was like I wasn't even there anymore. She was in her own world, savoring every bite while I sat there, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. I picked at my own food, trying to enjoy it, but the atmosphere had completely changed. The light, playful banter we'd had at the beginning of the evening was gone, replaced by this awkward silence that hung between us. I kept telling myself that maybe she was just really hungry or maybe the food was just that good, but deep down, I knew something was off. The way she was acting, it was like she'd already checked out of the date and was just sticking around for the meal. As the night dragged on, I started to feel more and more like an outsider at my own date. Emily would occasionally glance up, offer a brief smile, or say something generic like "this is really good," but there was no real conversation anymore. I was left to fill the silence with small talk, which felt increasingly forced and one-sided. It was clear she wasn't interested in getting to know me any better, and I couldn't help but feel disappointed. This wasn't how I'd imagined the night going at all. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the waiter brought us the bill. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when I saw the total, my heart sank. It was massive, way more than I'd ever spent on a meal, especially on a first date. I must have made a face because Emily glanced at the bill and then looked back at me with this almost dismissive smile. "Wow, that's small," she said casually, as if the amount was nothing to her. Then she handed the bill back to me and added, "You can take care of it, right?" I was stunned. I mean, I'd heard of guys being expected to pay on a first date, but this was something else entirely. The sheer audacity of it threw me off. I wasn't sure if she was joking or if she genuinely expected me to cover the entire thing without batting an eye. But the way she looked at me, like it was the most natural thing in the world, made it clear she wasn't joking. I hesitated, feeling this growing knot of frustration and disappointment in my chest. I didn't want to make a scene or come off as cheap, but at the same time, I couldn't believe what was happening. I decided to speak up, trying to keep my tone light even though I was anything but calm inside. "How about we split this?" I suggested, hoping she'd see the reason. Emily's expression didn't change. She looked at me like I'd just suggested something absurd. "Are you serious?" she asked, her tone flat and unamused. "I didn't bring any cash or cards. I thought you had this covered." I felt my stomach drop. Who goes out without any way to pay, especially on a date? But there it was, she'd effectively cornered me into paying the whole bill. I couldn't believe it. I'd never encountered anything like this before, and I felt a mix of anger, frustration, and something close to humiliation. I didn't want to argue, especially not in public, so I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled out my card and paid the bill, trying to keep my expression neutral even though I was fuming inside. As soon as the transaction was done, Emily's entire demeanor shifted again. She suddenly seemed in a hurry, almost like she'd been waiting for this moment to make her exit. She thanked me, but it was the kind of thank you that felt more like an obligation than genuine gratitude. Then, without any real explanation, she said she had to go and practically bolted out the door, leaving me standing there, receipt in hand, wondering what the hell had just happened. I walked out of the restaurant in a daze, feeling completely drained. The whole night had been a disaster from start to finish, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been played. It wasn't just the money, though that stung too. It was the way she'd acted, like the entire evening had been nothing more than a transaction for her. I kept replaying the night in my head, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong, what I could have done differently. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't about me at all. It was about her, and the fact that she clearly had no interest in anything beyond getting a free meal. I stared at my phone for what felt like hours after Emily sent that initial message the next morning. My emotions were all over the place: confusion, frustration, and a lingering sense of betrayal. The night before had been a disaster, and yet here she was, acting like nothing was wrong, like it had been some magical evening we both enjoyed. I couldn't help but feel like she was mocking me. Did she really not realize how terrible the date had been for me? Or did she just not care? Her text was simple: "Hey, last night was fun, we should do it again sometime." That smiley face at the end of her message felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to call what happened fun, but then, the other side of me, the side that always tried to give people the benefit of the doubt, started to rationalize. Maybe she was just awkward and didn't know how to act on a date. Maybe she didn't realize how she'd come across. Maybe, just maybe, she genuinely liked me and wanted a second chance to make things right. I didn't want to be the guy who jumped to conclusions, so I responded, albeit cautiously, "Yeah, it was interesting. Sure, we can do it again. When were you thinking?" Her reply came almost instantly, like she'd been waiting for me to say yes. "How about tonight, same place, I really liked it there." My stomach twisted into a knot as I read her message. The same place. The same expensive restaurant where she treated me like an afterthought while gorging herself on the most expensive items on the menu. Everything inside me screamed that this was a bad idea, but at the same time, I felt compelled to go. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, or maybe I just wanted to see if I could somehow turn things around. Whatever the reason, I found myself typing out a reply. "All right, see you there at 7. As soon as I hit send, I regretted it. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself that this was a good idea, that maybe this time would be different. But deep down, I knew that wasn't likely. I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily's interest in me was superficial at best, and at worst, entirely non-existent. But I was already committed, so I told myself I'd go into this date with my eyes wide open and my guard up. By the time I arrived at the restaurant that evening, I was feeling more apprehensive than anything else. This time, I wasn't early. I didn't want to give Emily the impression that I was eager or overly invested. I walked in at exactly 7, scanning the room until I spotted her at a table near the back. She was already seated, looking stunning in another chic outfit, her hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She looked up as I approached and flashed me that same easy smile that had initially drawn me to her. But now, instead of feeling charmed, I felt wary. "Hey," she greeted me as I sat down, "I'm so glad you could make it. I've been looking forward to this all day." I forced a smile, trying to gauge if there was any sincerity behind her words. "Yeah, me too," I lied, picking up the menu. She didn't waste any time. The moment the waiter came over, she launched into her order, picking out the most expensive items without a second thought. It was like a repeat of the night before, and I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach as I realized this wasn't going to be any different. "I'll have the lobster again," she said, glancing up at the waiter with a smile. "And the truffle risotto on the side, please. Oh, and the Chateau Margaux. I loved that last night." I watched in disbelief as she rattled off her choices, not even asking me if I had any preferences or if I wanted to share something. It was all about her, again. When the waiter turned to me, I barely glanced at the menu. "I'll just have a water," I said, handing the menu back. The waiter raised an eyebrow but didn't comment, just nodded and walked away. Emily looked at me, her smile faltering slightly. "Just water, you're not hungry?" "I'm fine," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I ate a bit before I came." It was a lie, of course, but I wasn't about to let her take me for a ride again. If she was going to treat me like a meal ticket, then I wasn't going to play along. I wanted to see how she'd react to me not ordering anything substantial, whether it would make her uncomfortable or if she'd even care. But she didn't seem bothered in the slightest. "Oh, okay," she said, turning her attention back to her phone as she waited for the food to arrive. The silence stretched out between us, and I found myself struggling to come up with something to say. I tried asking her about her day, her work, her hobbies, anything to get a conversation going. But each attempt was met with short, disinterested answers. She was more interested in scrolling through her phone than talking to me. When the food finally arrived, Emily's attention shifted entirely to her plate. She dug in with the same enthusiasm as the night before, savoring every bite, while I sat there, sipping my water, and wondering what the hell I was doing. It was like she was in her own little world, completely oblivious to the fact that this was supposed to be a date. I couldn't believe I'd let myself get dragged into this again. Then, just as I was contemplating how to salvage the rest of the evening or at least how to get through it without losing my mind, Emily suddenly put down her fork and looked at me with a bright smile. "I need to step out for a minute," she said, reaching for her purse. "Be right back." Before I could respond, she was up and heading toward the restroom, leaving her phone on the table. I watched her go, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu. It was the same routine as last night: leave me with the bill, and then vanish. But this time, I was ready. I'd learned my lesson, and I wasn't going to let her use me again. I glanced down at her phone, lying innocuously on the table. My curiosity got the better of me. I knew it was probably wrong, but I couldn't resist the urge to see what was going on. What if there was some explanation for her behavior? What if there was something that would make sense of all this? With a quick glance around to make sure no one was watching, I picked up her phone and unlocked it. I went straight to her contacts, my heart pounding in my chest. I scrolled down until I found my number, half expecting to see something benign, like my name or a nickname. But when I saw how she'd saved me in her phone, my blood ran cold. Free food. That's what she had me saved as. Just 2 words, but they hit me like a punch to the gut. It was like everything I'd been worrying about, every suspicion I'd had, was suddenly confirmed in the most brutal way possible. I wasn't even a person to her, I was just a source of free meals, nothing more. I sat there, staring at the screen in disbelief, my mind racing. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to do this again, to treat me like a walking wallet. I felt a surge of anger, but also a strange sense of relief. At least now I knew the truth. There was no more guessing, no more wondering if I was overreacting. She'd shown her true colors, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I quickly hung up the call I'd made to see how she'd saved my number, put the phone back on the table, and tried to compose myself. When Emily returned a few minutes later, she was all smiles again, completely unaware of what I'd just discovered. She picked up her fork and resumed eating, oblivious to the fact that everything had changed. I watched her for a moment, my mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to call her out on her behavior and tell her exactly what I thought of her. But another part of me wanted to play it cool, to see how far she would take it, and then drop the bombshell on her when she least expected it. I decided to wait. When the waiter brought the bill, Emily barely glanced at it before sliding it over to me with that same expectant look in her eyes. "Can you cover it?" she asked, her tone casual, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "It's not that much." I looked at the bill, seeing another ridiculous amount, and then back at her. My pulse quickened as I prepared to say what I'd been holding back since the moment I saw how she'd saved my number in her phone. "No," I said calmly, pushing the bill back toward her. "I didn't order anything worth that much. You can take care of your own meal this time." For a moment, Emily just stared at me, completely thrown off by my response. Her smile faltered, and I saw a flicker of confusion cross her face. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief and annoyance. "I don't have any money with me, remember?" "Yeah, that's convenient," I replied, my tone cold and unyielding. "But you know what? I'm not your free food. I saw how you saved my number on your phone. That's all I am to you, isn't it? Just a meal ticket?" Her eyes widened, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw genuine shock on her face. She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. "I'm not paying for your dinner again," I said, standing up and pulling out my wallet. "Here's for my drink and appetizer." I dropped a few bills on the table, more than enough to cover what I'd ordered. "You can take care of the rest." Emily's face turned a shade paler as she realized I was serious. She opened her mouth again, maybe to argue or to try and sweet-talk me into paying, but I didn't care. I'd had enough. Before she could respond, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving her sitting there with the bill in front of her. As I made my way to the door, I could hear her calling after me, her voice a mix of anger and desperation, but I didn't look back. I wasn't going to be her fool anymore. I'd wanted to believe that Emily was different, that maybe she'd had a bad night or that we'd just gotten off on the wrong foot. But the truth was, she'd never been interested in me, only in what I could provide. As I walked away from the restaurant, I couldn't help but replay the events of the past 2 nights in my mind. How could I have been so blind, But then again, maybe I wasn't blind, maybe I just wanted to see the best in people. I wanted to believe that there was more to Emily than what she'd shown me, but in the end, she was exactly what she appeared to be, someone who used others to get what she wanted. When I got home, I deleted her number from my phone without a second thought. I didn't need that kind of negativity in my life, and I certainly didn't need someone who saw me as nothing more than a free meal. So I'm an AITA because I tapped into her phone without permission and left, leaving her with the restaurant bill. Your opinion is interesting.